before AI regulations do kick in, I mean, talking about Google specifically, Google is a no small startup or a small player that does not know what it's doing at the moment. In fact, many are questioning the hegemony that Google has been enjoying for a very, very long time, and it has been in the eye of the storm, quite rightly so, in the past couple of days, not just for its AI chatbot, but also for other reasons, particularly delisting some of Indian developers and, you know, battling allegations that its policy are not fair for indigenous small players. What do we make of the kind of drama that we've seen unfolding around Google in the past couple of days?
Shweta, let's talk at the macro sense first before I come to Google. First and foremost, I am a voter for light touch regulation, especially in technology.
Okay.
It shouldn't stifle innovation. That's what you started with. But the challenge for regulation, not just for AI, the entire social media platform needs to be regulated. The problem is, for the last so many years now, we've been battling the government of India and many other governments about, them being identified as intermediaries where we have no control. Their servers are located in different countries of the world. Ultimately, if even if an FIR is lodged in a cyber crime, the IP address is the beginning of the case. In this case, there is no server here that you can track and seize and shut down.
Right.
So India can never shut down. So that's why there was this talk of co-location, where we can have a fair amount of control of the mirrored images. But that's the larger debate. In regard to Google acting in a certain monopolistic manner, if I can use that word, obviously at one level, I would imagine market forces should come into play. But if there is unruly technology and you are keen to penalize companies which are trying to find a berth on your track, then we have a problem. That's why delisting of many Indian apps and including some big ticket apps like InfoEdge, Shadi.com, Naukri.com, and these are companies which are household names in India. They have a past, they have a present, and they have a future. And if they are on your platform, which unfortunately is not resident in India, but it is a win-win business situation, market forces would have ensured that between the two B2B entities, there is a fair play. But as we have come to know now, there isn't a fair play. Google has given its perspective saying that this is a global practice and there is a payment mechanism. But with one day knocking off, already I have seen reports today with many of these websites, many of these apps claiming that we lost 40% of revenue. Who is responsible?
Absolutely.
So that's why Government of India has intervened. Unfortunately, if these big ticket tech companies, it's a very fine balance that Government of India has to do. It has to navigate preoccupying them with big ticket decisions of investing in India, growing in the Indian market, bringing in technology, getting in AI wherewithal. At the same level, keeping them in check. Check is required so that they don't turn unruly.
Absolutely. And before we move on particularly the kind of news items that we've seen floating around Google, of course, the monopolistic practices that many developers are alleging here in India, it's not just India specific, Karthik, because we've seen reports of how various competition commissions around the world, from Europe to the US to the UK and Germany, are challenging Google on its hegemony.
Absolutely. I think anti-competition, anti-competitive practices is something that Google has faced enough and more lawsuits across the world. European Union, of course, I think has come down the most heavily against Google, and Google has paid enough fines to sort of try and ease itself out of those tricky situations. I think again, I don't think a fine or just imposing a fine is going to be enough. But the larger problem is there is a business model that Google has created via its Play Store, and given the penetration that Android phones have across the world, even more so here in India, there is obviously a dependence of any app developer to play by the rules set by Alphabet or set by Google or set by the Play Store. Now, what is this? This is pretty much what is being referred to as a Google tax. So Google can charge up to 30% for any payment which is made using the Google payment ecosystem. There is a way around it. What Netflix does, for example, is the way around it. You can't actually go to the Netflix app and pay for your subscription. You've actually got to log on to a website and use other third-party payment gateways and make the payment. And that way avoid paying Google directly for using the same service on the app which you may have downloaded using the Play Store. But there is obviously there's a convenience problem with that. The ease of convenience of usage is actually minimized if you want to get somebody out of the app ecosystem, go somewhere else, make that payment and come back. So many operators, many app developers continue to use the Google tool to make payments. But the problem there, of course, is that there is a contractual agreement you have with Google. So if Google has asked you that for you to list and use my payment infrastructure, you've got to pay me 30% tax, then honestly you've got to pay Google 30% tax.
That's why I said, you know, there's a B2B enterprise relationship which is purely commercial. But then, you know, enough notice, is it given? Was it given? No, it was not given.
Absolutely. And the way these contracts are written, it's very difficult for smaller players in a country like India to actually fight them without government intervention.
So I think, you know, most of the apps in any case, whether you download any app, if it is not really a content consumption app, most of the apps in any case are free.
Right.
So there isn't really a payment gateway or a payment process being followed. In fact, if I read correctly, almost 87% of all the apps listed on the Play Store are free apps.
But
and
they
out
all
of the
aspire,
13,
but Karthik, they all aspire to go to
sure,
the payment
sure,
mechanism.
but out of
that's where the model is.
I mean, many of them have different revenue models. Advertising could be one of them. So the balance 13%, also many of them end up using the website bypass. But those who are listed within the ecosystem have got to, you know, oblige their contractual requirement. But the flip side there is that Google is telling them, and that is the sort of, you know, the Google Dadagiri that you were talking about, global Dadagiri. The Dadagiri is Google is saying, hey, if you don't follow this, then, you know, I'm going to knock you off. And it's not incumbent on you to use my services. You're doing it by will. Now, the point is, with just two platforms available, one being the Apple App Store and the other being the Google Play Store, app developers actually don't have a choice. They've got to live on both these platforms to cater to all citizens anywhere in the world. The alternative is for India to follow the China route. What is the China route? Have a Baidu like Bharat OS. So there was Bharat OS, and, you know, there were hot talks around Bharat OS that India is going to have its own operating system. But, you know, we haven't seen much movement on that. And is that the route we want to take? Do we want to be a closed app ecosystem like China?
Perhaps
where
Bharat OS could be an alternative.
I mean, create more options.
Sure, but the point
create more options.
Yes.
But do we want to take that route? I mean, if the whole world is there on Google and Apple formats, and you will then have to have an entire ecosystem from devices to operating systems to app developers to languages to engineers who know how to work on those languages and build those apps. And India is too large a market, honestly.
But Karthik, the difference between China and us is that China hasn't allowed many of these, you know, global tech companies.
That's what I'm saying. That is what I'm warning.
We have allowed them to exist. We can have our own version, but who will pay for it?
Yeah, so I'm saying, you know, the cost of building, the cost of developing a third app, and having more people trained on a new operating system, having enough devices that operate or work on that new operating system is a very long process. And by then, you know, keeping pace with technology is very difficult. And you will have missed a trick or two when you believe that you have arrived almost at par with what Android and iOS today, and it's going to take us many years. By then, the journey would have actually moved on for these platforms.
So in the interim,
will become very difficult.
So in the interim, a heavy hand regulation.
A heavy hand regulation perhaps, but also, you know, this would be another addition to India's digital public infrastructure, having its own operating system.